All right. Totally nervous to do these videos. I'm usually behind the lens. All right, so let's start with a little bit about me. My name is Gianna. I'm a wedding photographer, and I'm also a mental health counselor working at a private practice in Bethlehem. I'm a mom of 2 kids. I'm married to a guy named Ralph, and he's an arborist. And I'm going to be bringing you guys on a journey of building our new mold conscious and as much as we can afford non-toxic home. I've always had health issues my entire life, and I never really knew the root cause of them. But in 2025 of last year, I developed something way more serious. After going on vacation, we came back to our house, which we had just done some renovations on, opening walls, creating different airflow accesses in the house. We opened up a porch that was also connected to the attic that ended up becoming a part of the living space. Within 24 hours of being in our house, I developed hives all over my body, as well as extreme indigestion problems. I've had health issues my whole life that have manifested in many different ways. Autoimmune disease is really tricky. It often feels like you're chasing an invisible needle, but nothing like this. I've never had hives that wouldn't go away, and it was really, really fucking scary. I chalked it up to coming from a holistic background and holistic philosophy. Maybe it was my diet. Maybe it was the food I was eating. Maybe it was the coffee I was drinking that I knew that I shouldn't be. Maybe I was working too much, which I definitely was. Maybe I was exhausted from having 2 kids, which I definitely was. But what I didn't want to focus on or address was that it could be a mold issue in the house. Again, we had just renovated. The house was feeling clean and really beautiful. I had just invested so much money in these renovations. There must have been some psychological blind spot where I was I'm unwilling to think that it's the house, because if it's the house, then we may need to leave. So for 3 months I persisted like this, and I sought out so many different avenues. I changed my diet. I lost weight. I stopped drinking coffee. I was doing different modalities, working with different holistic practitioners, acupuncturists, chiropractors. But nothing was pushing the needle, and things actually seemed to start to get worse. Until I hit a wall early April, right around my daughter's birthday. I was in the bedroom. At the time, I had also started feeling really tired a lot. In addition to the hives, sometimes parts of my skin would swell if too much pressure from clothing or a shoe or a bag would go onto my shoulder. I would actually get a welt or a hive in its place. Laying in bed, watching a movie, just trying to relax. At this point, starting to feel quite a bit of chronic fatigue. My lips started to swell out of nowhere. My entire face started swelling. I developed anaphylactic response to, again, I did not know what. This was all happening, as far as I was concerned, literally out of nowhere. Entire face swells, lips swell. I immediately drive myself to the hospital. Again, we have 2 small children, so I felt I'm safe enough to drive myself to the hospital because he needs to stay with the kids, and we didn't want to take the kids to the hospital in the middle of the night. I got to the hospital and things were pretty emergent. The hospital staff was treating me in an extremely emergent case. They even told me, if the swelling doesn't start to go down, we're going to have to stick a tube in your throat. Injected me with adrenaline, antihistamine, and the swelling went down, but it didn't really go away. It kind of like felt like it was still under the skin. The next day, I started to feel a little bit better, taking quite a bit of Benadryl, but again, entered back into the same environment. Within 24 hours, my entire face was swelling again, my shoulders, my arms, my entire body. These mast cell reactions for mold poisoning don't just manifest as hives. As they get worse, you start to actually have swelling in your ligaments, your fingers, and bruising, severe bruising. The next day, I called an air specialist, a mold person, to come in and test our home. I was like, okay, I have to be open to this being an environmental thing, which at the time I was not. I think in reflection, and I'm actually realizing this right now, I think there was some kind of mental block. I was like genuinely not wanting to look at what it could be. He comes in that day. I decided to go and stay at a hotel. My daughter's birthday was the next day, and we had this like outdoor picnic and pool party planned for her 6th birthday. And I really needed that to happen despite what was happening to me physically. There was a part of me that really needed to feel some sense of normalcy. I went and stayed at a hotel for the night. My husband actually came and stayed with me that night just to keep me company. And again, in the middle of the night, I started swelling again. Again, not in the same environment, but the reaction was really bad. And histamine is interesting because mold can cause histamine disorders. Mold causes mast cell, and if you do a little bit of research, you'll find that upwards of 90% of MCAS patients actually experience mold poisoning, whether they're aware of it or not. We had our daughter's birthday. My ankles, my feet, and my knees were completely swollen and bruised. Again, this is like an inside out thing. I didn't hit my leg. I didn't sprain my ankle. This was like my body was attacking me from the inside out. Or from a more terrain theory, my body was alarming me and saying something is wrong and you need to get help. You need to pay attention. And I did. That day, after her birthday, I stayed at a hotel again. The next morning, my daughter, my son, myself, and my mother went to stay at her house. I left the house. I said, we're going to get a mold remediation done. We had the mold remediation company come. They gave us a quote. They identified that it was in the attic, which I guess through the renovation that had happened started to seep into the rest of the house. And while we were gone for the two-week vacation, it probably seeped into the entire house. Mold vapor is totally invisible, and once it's released, it starts to seep into every part of the house. One could argue that the mold is actually safer untouched, left inside the wall, but once you start breaking walls open, moving material, opening up spaces that weren't open to other spaces, that's when you start to actually experience real problems. So we go to my mom's house. My symptoms did start to dissipate, and while I was still having swelling and MCAS symptoms, I wasn't swelling to an anaphylactic level. And at this point, I started taking antihistamines on a regular basis. We stayed at my mom's house for a few weeks with the intention of coming back. I've dealt with mold remediations before, thinking I would come in, I would be able to identify what needs to be cleaned, that my husband would be able to manage the cleaning and the wiping after mold remediation. You have to do spot cleaning of the entire house and everything in it, as well as getting rid of all of your porous items. And every time that I entered the house, my face would start swelling again. And at this point in the journey, I started to feel like maybe I wasn't able to go back home. We were staying in an Airbnb. The intention was to stay for a month. And that month came. I continued to wrestle in my mind with maybe we can go back. Maybe we just need to clean more. Maybe we just need to clean the house out and just get rid of everything in it. I mean, at this point, my emotional state was actually pretty frantic and I felt extremely stressed out. I wasn't able to work. I had to give up most of my work. I'm a wedding photographer. I had to pass off upwards of 10 weddings, and I did find people coverage. It was devastating. Financially, emotionally, and spiritually, completely broke me down. And I feel like the last phase of this shedding of my sense of self occurred when we decided to not go back home. And not only to not go back home, but we also decided to get rid of all of our belongings. We only kept things that could be washed. We got rid of most of our kids' toys, all of our furniture, all of our books. I had a pretty large art collection that was passed down through my family, of originals and prints, but still artwork means the world to me, and these pieces carry stories and history of my life and my family's life. We put those in storage, but we got rid of all of our belongings and literally moved into an Airbnb and slowly started to accumulate clothing, sneakers, toys for the kids, books. There were things that we just didn't take with us. Initially, I thought actually we should leave, that we should leave the East Coast. I felt a lot of anxiety about being here. The East Coast is a super moldy and wet place. But due to finances and having a business here, my husband's also an arborist. He runs a tree company and he climbs and works in northeastern PA. We just couldn't make that move. So next best thing, we started looking at other houses, and it became increasingly clear to me that mold is a real issue. Whether people are aware of it or not, a lot of these houses are not built with the proper drainage, are not built with the proper vapor barriers, are not built with the right HVAC systems. Modern HVAC systems have all plastic ductwork. You can't clean plastic ductwork, and plastic harbors mold. So 20, 30 houses that I looked at, and I could tell just walking in the houses that they had mold in them. So early last fall, around September, October, we decided as a family that we would sell our house. We got it mold remediated. Ethically, I knew that I had to do that. In order to sell it, we got a clean air quality test. We disclosed in the disclosure papers that the house indeed does have humidity issues, and there have been mold issues in the home. I believe that the home is safe for someone, but I didn't feel it was safe for me. And my nervous system actually felt completely traumatized, almost as if one could say that the house became my abuser. And that's genuinely how I felt. I felt terrified of the house. We ended up finding a piece of land. Ironically, the land has water issues, but that's super prevalent in the Poconos. And we found builders who were willing to work with us with some pretty extreme requests around non-toxic building products, all metal ductwork HVAC systems, ERV systems, dehumidification systems, no basement, no garage, no attic. Everything in the house will be touched and connected to the ERV system, the HVAC system, the dehumidifier. And I'm going to take you guys on that journey. I know that this feels like a really big introduction. I also haven't really said this all in one piece to anyone before. I'm letting you guys into a really vulnerable part of my reality, but I feel really called, maybe even spiritually, that this happened to me, that maybe I can help others, and hopefully I can build a healthier home for me and my family. There's so much thought that's gone into this. And I also think that the documentary and this YouTube channel will also help me to keep track of it and to keep track of the builders and to stay on top of things. Like, we have the framing coming up, and I'm ordering a humidity reader because nothing in the building can go in with closed, like, we can't close up the walls until everything's below 16%. I'm not a clean building specialist. I'm just a layperson. I do not believe in perfection. After losing everything that I loved and thought meant something to me, I've come to the realization that perfection does not exist. And being completely mold free on the East Coast is not going to happen. So that's not my goal. I have to learn to live with some level of mold. I'll also talk about on this journey the medications that I'm on and how they've helped me. I won't touch on that today, but I think I'll do an episode a little bit later on going into more depth about that. But I'm really excited about this. I'm excited to bring you guys on this journey. I'm excited to introduce you to my family. Next week we start framing, so I'm going to be there all week, and I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit of the framing process. But once those walls are up and closed in, that's when a lot of this building process is going to come into play. We've already hit some snags. The builders, it's not code in Pennsylvania to have to tape vapor barriers, so we're going to have to put in an entirely different vapor barrier on the slab before we lay our flooring down, which is fine. And I'm not angry at them, but I'm more angry at myself. I should have been more on top of them to tape and do it properly. Out here they just basically need you to have the plastic laid before they put the concrete, but it doesn't have to be taped or sealed. And there's some varying belief systems on vapor barriers. Like, a completely sealed vapor barrier can actually cause like hydrostatic pressure. So I'm moving through this building process myself and learning as I move. We also have some drainage issues on the property, which is really common in the Poconos. So as we move through this process, we might actually find that we're going to need to do perimeter drains and create better water flow. The land that we got is really clay ridden. It is clay and it's not draining properly. And how do we bring the environment, the clay, the dirt, back to a healthier state? So I'm exploring things like biochar, working with a permaculture specialist, and just learning how to use drainage, maybe even to create like a living pond. But I'm excited for this. There's also some other fun things that I've learned about, like these new paints, Ecos paint. I also have heard of some paints that are completely mineral paints. They're made of like limestone. So we're going to also explore what the best paint is going to be for a completely non-toxic home. There's certain things that I can't afford. I can't afford hempcrete. I can't afford completely to do wool inside of the walls. I actually explored completely all natural wool insulation, and actually in Pennsylvania it's really hard to get wool to be the code, so I had to kind of let that one go. But I'm gonna do my best, so you're gonna see what it's like to build a natural, as non-toxic as I can afford, mold conscious home under $1 million, because I'm not extremely wealthy and we are putting everything we own as well as help from my mom into building this house. Alright guys, this is my first episode and just a small introduction to who I am. Please subscribe, please like, and please post any information in the comments. I would love to get to know the community that ends up following us on this journey. I imagine a lot of you guys have been through what I've been through, and if I can be of any help, I want to. So thanks so much. I'll see you guys soon.